Long ago, in a time when kingdoms were carved through war and betrayal, when the weight of a crown was measured in blood, there existed a land of splendor and sorrow, a kingdom known as Valtoria. Valtoria was a kingdom of warriors, a realm where the strong ruled and the weak perished. Its vast lands stretched from the golden deserts of the east to the icebound mountains of the north. Mighty castles stood like sentinels upon the hills, their walls built from the stone of ancient battles. But for all its wealth and power, Valtoria was not immune to the shadows of ambition. For in this kingdom, two brothers were born to the same blood, yet bound for different fates. One would be king by right. The other would stop at nothing to take the throne for himself. This is the tragic tale of Prince Aldric and Prince Roderick, sons of King Leoric, heirs to a destiny written in war and betrayal. A story where honor clashed with greed, where brother turned against brother, and where a kingdom that once stood tall crumbled under the weight of a single act of treason. But tell me, was it fate that led them down this dark path? Or was it simply the greed of a man who wanted more than he deserved? Stay with me, for as this story unfolds, you will witness how power can turn family into enemies and how a single betrayal can change the course of history forever. The kingdom of Valtoria was ruled by King Leoric the Just, a ruler known for his wisdom and strength. Under his reign, Valtoria prospered. The people flourished under his leadership, and the kingdom's borders expanded through both diplomacy and war. But no matter how great a king, no ruler could escape the fate that time had written for him. King Leoric had two sons. His firstborn, Prince Aldric, was noble, brave, and wise beyond his years. He was the pride of the kingdom, a warrior who had led battles at a young age and a scholar who studied the ancient ways of ruling justly. His second-born, Prince Roderick, was strong but different. From the time they were children, Roderick had always felt like he was standing in the shadow of his older brother. No matter how much he tried, no matter how hard he trained, it was always Aldric who received the king's favor. Aldric sat beside the king at the royal council. Aldric was taught the sacred laws of the kingdom. Aldric was given the sword of their forefathers, a symbol of the next ruler of Valtoria. And Roderick? He was always second. Always the one looking from the outside. Always the one ignored. Hatred, like a disease, began to fester in his heart. He swore to himself that he would never live in Aldric's shadow again. And so began his descent into darkness. Fate is cruel, and kings, no matter how great, do not live forever. One fateful winter, King Leoric fell gravely ill. His body, once strong as a mountain, weakened with every passing day. His voice, once thunderous in the halls of power, faded to a whisper. The healers did all they could, but not even the greatest magic could stop the hands of time. The kingdom mourned in silence, for they knew that the end of their beloved king was near. On his deathbed, with only his sons by his side, King Leoric spoke his final words. He placed his frail hand upon Aldric's shoulder and whispered, "My son, you will rule this kingdom as I have. Led with honor, with wisdom, with strength." Roderick stood at the foot of the bed, fists clenched, heart pounding. Their father was dying, and even in his final breath, he chose Aldric. He didn't even look at Roderick. Did he not see him? Did he not care? Did he not realize that he had created the very monster who would one day bring ruin to his kingdom? That night, as the bells tolled to announce the death of the great king, Roderick made a vow. Aldric would never wear the crown. No. The throne would belong to him. Even if it meant killing his own brother. Roderick knew that if he wanted the throne, he had to act fast. Aldric was to be crowned king in a grand ceremony before the kingdom. The nobles, the warriors, and the people would swear fealty to him, and once that happened, it would be too late to take the throne by force. And so, Roderick set his first trap. The plan was simple: Aldric would not live to see the sunrise. Late at night, as Aldric lay in his chambers, unaware of the storm brewing around him, Roderick hired an assassin. A hooded figure, trained in the art of silent death, slipped through the castle corridors like a shadow. Aldrich slept peacefully, unaware that death crept closer with each step. The assassin raised his dagger. But fate had other plans. For at that moment, the palace guards stormed in. The assassin, caught in the act, tried to flee but was struck down before he could escape. Aldrich awoke to the sound of swords clashing, his heart pounding as he realized. Someone had tried to kill him. Someone within the palace. Someone who wanted him dead. And deep in the halls of the castle, in the darkness where no one could see, Roderick clenched his fists in fury. His plan had failed. But this was only the beginning. He would not stop until the throne was his. Even if it meant betraying everything he once swore to protect. And so, the first attempt to seize the throne had failed, but this was only the beginning of Roderick's treachery. Roderick's first attempt to assassinate Aldrich had failed. But failure did not mean defeat. No, to a man consumed by greed, failure was simply another lesson, a reminder that patience and precision were just as deadly as a sharpened blade. And so, Roderick devised another plan. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, Aldrich would not escape. The plan was simple: if Aldrich could not be killed in the dead of night, then he would be slain in the light of day, by the hands of his own warriors. The morning after the failed assassination attempt, Aldrich, still shaken but resolute, addressed the council. "There is a traitor in our midst," he declared, his voice steady, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of deception. "I will not rest until I know who seeks my death." Roderick, seated beside him, nodded solemnly. "A coward who hides in the shadows deserves no mercy," he said, his voice laced with false loyalty. But in his heart, he smiled. Because he already had a plan in motion. That very afternoon, Aldrich was to ride out to the northern woods, a customary tradition before his coronation, where the soon-to-be king would hunt a stag as a sign of his strength and connection to the land. It was a royal rite. And it was the perfect opportunity to strike. Aldrich rode out with a small band of warriors, each of them hand-picked by Roderick himself. The hunt had begun. The woods, thick with towering trees and creeping mist, were eerily silent. Not a single bird sang. Not a single branch stirred in the wind. Something felt wrong. And then, the first arrow flew. It struck one of Aldrich's men square in the chest. Before the prince could react, more arrows rained from the treetops, cutting down his guards one by one. Chaos erupted. Swords clashed, men screamed, and blood soaked the ground. Aldrich fought like a lion, his blade cutting through the traitors who had sworn their loyalty to him. But it was clear, this was no ordinary ambush. This was an execution. And just as Aldrich turned, ready to strike down another foe, he saw him. Roderick. Standing at the edge of the battle, watching in silence. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Aldrich knew the truth. His brother had betrayed him. His own blood had sold him to the enemy. With a furious roar, Aldrich charged toward Roderick, but before he could reach him, an arrow pierced his side. Pain shot through him. His vision blurred. His knees buckled. And the last thing he saw before darkness took him, was his brother smiling. News of Aldrich's death spread across the kingdom like wildfire. The nobles, the warriors, and the people mourned their fallen prince, believing that he had been killed by bandits in the forest. But it was all a lie. The truth was far more sinister. Roderick had not simply killed his brother. No. He had staged an elaborate funeral, displaying an unrecognizable, burned body in Aldrich's royal robes, a body that was not his. The people wept. The council declared Aldrich's passing. And just as grief swallowed the kingdom whole, Roderick seized the throne. He stood before the people, his voice heavy with false sorrow. "My brother is dead," he announced, his expression a mask of grief. "I never wished for this. But in his absence, I will take up his burden. I will rule in his stead. The people had no choice but to accept him. And so, on the day that was meant to be Aldric's coronation, the crown was placed upon Roderick's head instead. He had won. Or so he thought. Because what Roderick did not know was that Aldric was still alive. For weeks, Aldric had remained in the shadows, hidden away by a band of loyalists who had rescued him from the battlefield. His body was broken, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. His brother had stolen the throne. But he would take it back. Aldric's loyalists, a group of warriors who had sworn an oath to the true king, had taken him to the mountains of the west, where the remnants of his father's old army still stood. They believed him to be dead. But when they saw him standing before them, a king without a crown, but a warrior with vengeance in his heart, they knelt. And they swore to him, "We will fight." Thus began the war for the throne. Roderick, now king, sat upon the throne he had stolen, ruling with an iron fist. But peace does not come to a king who built his empire on betrayal. Rumors began to spread. Whispers in the streets, murmurs in the courts. The true king lives. The soldiers who had once sworn loyalty to Roderick began to doubt him. And when Aldric finally emerged from the shadows, leading an army of warriors who still believed in his rule, the kingdom erupted into civil war. The battle for the throne had begun. And only one brother would survive. The final confrontation took place in the very castle they had once called home. Aldric, leading his army, stormed the gates. Roderick, desperate to hold on to the throne, sent every last soldier to stop him. But fate had already chosen its victor. The battle raged for hours. Blood stained the throne room floor. And in the end, it came down to just the two of them. Aldric and Roderick. One last fight. One last chance. Steel clashed against steel. Blades cut through armor. And finally, Aldric's sword found its mark. Roderick fell. The brother who had betrayed him, the man who had stolen his throne, lay dying at his feet. And in his final breath, Roderick looked up at Aldric and whispered, "Was it worth it?" And with that, he was gone. And so, the kingdom of Valtoria was restored. Aldric, now king, ruled with wisdom and honor. But the scars of betrayal would never fade. For no matter how much power one gains, a throne built on blood will always crumble. Now, I ask you, do you believe Roderick was truly evil, or was he simply a man who wanted what he thought was his? And if you were in Aldric's place, would you have spared him? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales of power, betrayal, and revenge. Because in the end, history is written by the victors.